Good evening, everyone. This is Rabbi Mizrahi from the Israel Synagogue. Tonight, we are doing our first in a series of explorations in Jewish philosophy. Tonight, I wanted to begin with sort of a fundamental question. And the question is, we talk about Torah all of the time, um, but what exactly is Torah? Um, and we use the term, but what does it mean? And so I wanted to just go through some ideas. Most of the time, when people think of Torah, they think of that scroll that sits in the ark in the synagogue, and that certainly is one answer. But you might be surprised to learn that the answer is much broader than that. And the word Torah, which means teaching, can be something that is extremely narrowly defined, or it could be very broadly defined. So let's dive in and take a look at what we're talking about. So I want you to think about the concept of Torah as being sort of a pyramid, which have very narrow definitions towards the top and very broad definitions towards the bottom. So as we said, most people think about the five books of Moses, the Torah scroll that we keep in the ark in the synagogue, and most of you know that that is written on parchment, not paper, with a special ink. And those are the holiest thing that we have. And those five books of Moses are also known as the Pentateuch, which is comes from the Greek penta, meaning five. In Hebrew, it's known as the Chumash because the word Chamesh in Hebrew means five as well. And they're known as Chamisha Chumshe Torah. So these are the five books of Torah. And what are those five books and what do they contain? And there's an example of a Torah scroll from the 15th century, but we're all familiar with the Torah scroll. So the first book is a book of Genesis, Bereshit, and in this book, the Torah records the creation of the universe, the flood, and all of the history of the patriarchs and the matriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Sarah, and Rebecca, and Leah, and Rachel, as well as the story of Joseph, the Technicolor Dreamcoat, and how he comes to be in Egypt, and how the Jewish people, this clan of Jacob, the Israelites, winds up in Egypt and eventually becomes enslaved. The second book of the Torah is called Exodus, Shemot in Hebrew. The first half deals with the Exodus from Egypt, the Ten Commandments movie. But the back half of the book deals with the building and the construction of the tabernacle, which was the portable holy temple that they used for the 38 years or so in the desert. And then for the next 400 or so years, once they entered the land of Israel, before Solomon built the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. The third book in English is called Leviticus, which is Latin, meaning dealing with the laws of the Levites, the priestly tribe. And a good part of the book deals with, now that we have this tabernacle, what are the orders of the different offerings and sacrifices that should be brought in the temple, meal offerings, all kinds of gift offerings, wine libations, and things of that sort, as well as many, many ethical rules for noble, dignified living, which apply to all Jews, not just the Levites. The fourth book is called the Book of Numbers. It's in Hebrew, Bamidbar. In Hebrew, it means in the desert, and that's more accurate because it deals with all of the adventures that the Jews had in those 38 years from the time they left Mount Sinai and received the Torah until the time that they entered the land of Israel. It's called Numbers because there's a census at the beginning of the book when the Jews are still at the foot of Mount Sinai, and there's a second census as they're about to enter the land of Israel. The final book of the five books of Moses is Deuteronomy, Latin for deuter meaning two, deutero. Many of the laws that were given in the earlier books of the Torah are reiterated here by Moses because this book essentially is his last will and testament. Over the course of the last 36 days of his life, he inveighs upon the Jews not to abandon God and not to abandon the covenant and all the mitzvot that he had given them, and it's foreboding because he knows that we Jews will stray and we will be have to suffer the consequences of stepping away from God and those mitzvot. And those are the 5 books of Moses. That is what's contained on that scroll. It's written down. And so we'll put the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, way up at the top of the pyramid. But that's not only the only definition of Torah. In addition to the 5 books of Moses, we have all the written books of the Nevi'im, the prophets. And some of us are familiar with these writings. These were messages that were transmitted by God to these prophets in a dreamlike state. It's not the same level of prophecy as Moses, but we have the earlier prophets like Joshua, which recalls his assuming the mantle of leadership after Moses dies in the conquest of the land of Israel. The book of Judges, which deals with the period of about 350 years after Joshua dies, and how the Jews govern themselves and the things that happen in that period. Then we have the book of Samuel, the book of Kings. All of these are very, very heavily invaded with history. And then the later prophets are live in the time at the end of the first temple period, and they warn the Jews about their backsliding, their disobedience, their hypocrisy, and what will happen to them with the destruction of the first temple. So these are we draw from these books when we read the Haftorah on Saturday morning. The custom is to not only read a portion of the 5 books of Moses every Shabbat, starting at the very beginning and going to the very end without skipping anything. But for the Haftarah, it's not half Torah. It's actually a different word altogether. In the Hebrew, it means to finish off, lahaftir, and we draw from the writings of the prophets for the second reading on Saturday morning. And there's usually some thematic connection between the selection from Nevi'im and something that is to be found in the weekly Torah portion in the 5 books of Moses. So we're going to set Nevi'im just below the 5 books of Moses. But as you can see, the definition of Torah continues to become more broad. Both of those are Torah. We also have the books of the Ketuvim, which means the sacred writings. These are also part of the written Torah. There's a picture there of Daniel in the lion's den. The Ketuvim include poetry like the book of Psalms, which we draw heavily upon for our prayers, the book of Proverbs, the book of Job. We have the 5 scrolls that we read in the annual cycle. Song of Songs we read on Passover, Ruth we read on Shavuot, Lamentations we read on Tisha B'Av, Esther we read, of course, on Purim, and Ecclesiastes we read on Sukkot. And then the other books are historical in nature, the book of Daniel, the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, and the books of Divrei Hayamim, of Chronicles, which is all primarily history. But this is all part of the written Torah, and this is also Torah. So we've said it there. Now, these 24 books that I've just described constitute the written Torah. Christians sometimes call it the Old Testament. We just call it the Testament, the Torah. The other thing you should see is that on the left side of the pyramid, Torah starts with the letter Taf. The prophets Nevi'im is a Nun, and Ketuvim is a Chaf. And sometimes you will hear the written Torah referred to as Tanakh, which is an acronym. We tend to like our acronyms in Hebrew. So Tanakh is the entire written Torah, not only the 5 books of Moses, the books of the prophets, and the Holy Scriptures. But Torah doesn't end there. We have something called Mishnah, and Mishnah is a body of knowledge that was transmitted orally from rabbi to teacher since the time of Moses. According to Jewish tradition, God gave both the written law, the Tanakh, and the oral law to Moses on Mount Sinai. The oral law is the oral tradition as relayed by God to Moses, and from him transmitted and taught to the sages, the rabbinic leaders of each subsequent generation. So, for example, the Torah, the written Torah, is not exhaustive. It says that on the holiday of Sukkot, we should take a palm frond and we take a myrtle and we should take the willows, and we should take the fruit of a beautiful tree. Well, what fruit is that? Is it a peach? Is it an apple? The Torah itself does not uh, make that clear. So to fulfill the mitzvah properly, Moses went in to the tent of meeting, to the Mishkan, the tabernacle, inquired of God what his intent was, and God responded that it is the citron, the etrog. And so there began a corpus of oral knowledge that's not written down, or was not written down for over 1,500 years. It was taught orally from rabbi to teacher, and then from rabbi to student. And when that student grew old enough, became a rabbi, he transmitted it to his students. It's reminds one a little bit of Fahrenheit 451 at the end, where everybody becomes a book, and they spend their whole life memorizing the book so that it isn't lost to Western civilization. Well, the Mishnah was the same way. People would review it and review it and review it orally and go over it again and again and again to make sure that they had the tradition of how it was taught to them exactly just right. Now, what happened was there was a man by Rabbi Yehuda the Prince, Rabbi Judah. He was friendly with Marcus Aurelius. He lived after the temple was destroyed, in the first temple after the temple was destroyed. And he understood that because of the Roman expulsion, that the chances of the oral tradition being corrupted or forgotten were very, very high. So he did something quite revolutionary, and he wrote down the oral tradition. He curated and consolidated all the various oral traditions and opinions into a single body of law, which became known as the Mishnah. The Mishnah has 6 orders, 6 different books. The first one is Zra'im, that deals with agricultural laws and prayers. Moed, which deals appointed times, which deals with Shabbat and the laws of the festivals. Nashim, women, dealing with issues of marriage and divorce. Nizikin, damages, which deals with civil and criminal law. Kadshim, which deals with sacrificial rites, the things that went on in the temple, dietary laws, and Taharot, which are issues related to spiritual purity and impurity, and things of that sort. So there are 6 orders of the Mishnah that accompany the 5 books of Moses, and this oral tradition explains obscure or abstract ideas in the written law. Now, what happened was Rabbi Yehuda the Prince, he was so concerned that his work of the Mishnah would not be misconstrued or misunderstood. He wrote it in a very telegraphic style. But unfortunately, that boomeranged a little, and it was so telegraphic that there was some debate about what exactly he meant and what the intention was, and what the rabbis that he quoted, what they meant. And so, over the next, the Gemara, the Mishnah was compiled around the year 200, and in the years following that, the scholarship, the seat of Jewish scholarship after the Roman expulsion became Babylonia, 900 miles away, modern day Iraq. And the Babylonian rabbis discussed the Mishnah at great length. And this body of work was called Gemara. It was recorded about how they understood the Mishnahs, and taken together, Mishnah and Gemara are known as Talmud. And the Talmud is a central text of rabbinic Judaism and the primary source of Jewish religious law and theology. When you see all the yeshiva students studying in the big seminaries, they're studying Talmud. And it is the big leagues. It's dense, it's difficult to understand, it's in Aramaic. And you really have to have, as a prerequisite, a very solid grounding in the oral law, in the written law, in the 5 books of Moses and the prophets and the scriptures, in order to follow along on these discussions. And what this distills out of these discussions is common everyday practice of Jewish law. So the Talmud is our central text for study, but you have to have a very solid grounding in the other books in the pyramid before you can really make much sense of what's going on in the Talmud. But the Talmud, of course, is Torah, even though it's not the 5 books of Moses. It's not even in the written Torah. The Talmud is called the oral law, even though it's no longer oral. All of these discourses were written down. The Mishnah was written down by Rabbi Judah the Prince, Yehuda Hanasi, but we refer to it as the oral law, even though it's been written down. So both the oral law and the written law are Torah. There's no question about it. So any of those books are considered studying Torah, even if you're not looking at the 5 books of Moses. But they're all grounded in the 5 books of Moses. The next level in terms of broadness and becoming more dilute, as it were, is the full universe of Jewish learning. This is also Torah as well. So you have history. Jewish history is a form of Torah study. Jewish philosophy is a form of Torah study. Self-improvement. There's a whole corpus of works on how to become a more refined person, how to become a better Jew, how to become kinder and more sensitive to the needs of people around you, and a better example of noble and dignified living. Kabbalah. Many people are interested in Jewish mysticism, biblical exegesis, which we learn on Monday night, understanding the deeper meanings of the Torah, Talmudic exegesis, Jewish law, biblical archaeology, etc., etc. All these different disparate interests are all part of this thing that we call Torah. So I hope you're beginning to develop the notion that the word Torah, the meaning of the word Torah can be narrowly defined, way up at the top of the pyramid, or very broadly defined as we get to the base of the pyramid. Now, I'm going to say something which you may find rather shocking, but even farther down on the base of the pyramid is the diligent pursuit of truth, wherever we can find it. The full body of human knowledge is a form of Torah study. How so? Well, if you study biology, for example, biology is a study of life. Who is the author of life? God, of course. So when we study human biology, we are studying the machine that God created. When we study physics, we're studying the laws of nature and the laws of the universe that God created. So it adds to the body of not only our human knowledge, but it's a form of Torah study if you're doing it for the sake of coming closer to God. And that's true for all of the disciplines, be it literature, be it the arts, be it the sciences, music, you name it. If we are pursuing truth through whatever discipline, that is a form of Torah study. And I'll prove that to you in just a moment. So as you can see, the pyramid of Torah can be extremely broad and sort of dilute down at the bottom, or it can be extremely narrow and quite concentrated, as it were, at the very, very top. But you'll also notice that way at the top of the pyramid, there's an open space, and I did that deliberately. What goes way, way up at the top of this pyramid? And the answer to that question is that it is your Torah, which means as follows. After a lifetime of studying Torah, studying the Talmud, studying the written law, becoming familiar with the history, Jewish history, and David and Solomon and Saul and all of the kings of Judah, the kings of Israel, and all the things that happened to us that are reflected in the books of the Torah. And we study all of this over time. You, as a scholar of Torah, begin to develop ideas of your own, novella, innovations that no one has ever thought of before. And that becomes your Torah. We speak very commonly about the Torah of Rabbi so-and-so, the Torah of Rabbi Soloveitchik, the Torah of Rabbi Kook, the Torah of Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. Doesn't mean that they have their own separate Torah school. It means that their teachings, their innovations are their teachings. Torah means teachings. And I'll give you an example of one that I actually stumbled upon when I was several years ago. And this is an example of an innovation, a chidush, that you may not be familiar with. So I just want to show this to you. In the book of Exodus, when Moses is standing at the burning bush, he asks God, "What is your name?" And God answers very, very cryptically. He says, Ehyeh, Asher Ehyeh. I am that I am, or I will be what I will be, however you choose to translate that. Well, we have something in Torah study called gematria. It comes from the Greek word geometry, actually, but gematria is Jewish numerology. And the idea is that the sacred tongue, Hebrew, is not only letters, but each letter of the Hebrew alphabet has a numeric equivalent. And so you can learn things out from the numerology of the various words. I stumbled upon this. This is something that I have never seen written anywhere. This is my chidush. This is my innovation and my contribution to the body of Jewish knowledge. If you take a look at the words Ehyeh, Asher Ehyeh, if you can follow in the Hebrew, the gematria, the numerology of the word I am that I am or I will be is 21. Well, Asher can be rendered as times or multiply. So 21 times 21 is 441. And 441 happens to be the gematria of the word emet, of truth, the Hebrew word true. So from this, we can learn that God is true, but anything that is not based in objective truth cannot be godly. And so we hold objective truth in very, very high regard in Judaism. And that is why coming back to our pyramid, I can get to it. Close this. If we come back to our pyramid, I included the quest for subjective truth wherever we can find it, because God is truth. So there you can see, I hope this little exposition broadened your idea of what Torah is. It's not just the scroll that's in the closet in the synagogue, but it's something much, much broader. Anything that helps us draw closer to God, any study of all these different texts brings us, deepens our relationship with the Almighty is Torah. And we're very fortunate to live in a time where virtually all of these works are available in English translation for those who don't have command of the Hebrew. Virtually any book in the Jewish universe is available in English translation nowadays. So there's no impediment to any of us picking up any of the books that strike our interest and to start studying Torah. The second half of this presentation is about why is Torah worthy of our study. And so I want to introduce the concept of the Yam Shel Torah, the sea of Torah. Torah is likened to the ocean. And why is that? The answer is the Torah, the ocean is also very, very deep. It's very broad, it's vast. And Torah is likened to the ocean for that reason. Regrettably, for many, many people that don't have command of Hebrew, the Yam Shel Torah is restricted to the surface. You only see the surface of the ocean if you don't have the Hebrew. Oftentimes, it's very difficult to get to the deeper layers of Torah if you don't have command of Hebrew. So the ocean is vast, but you can't always see what's below the surface if you don't have the Hebrew. We talk about the depths, plumbing the depths of Torah as a pardes. Pardes is a Hebrew word. It means an orchard. The word paradise comes from the word pardes, and it's an obvious allusion to the Garden of Eden and how that connects to Torah. But pardes is an acronym, and it means the following. The pei of pardes means Peshat, the simple meaning of the words, the way the words string together to become sentences and paragraphs and narratives, just the very simplest surface meaning of the words, the Bible stories for kiddies, if you will, and that's valuable. We have to have command of that, but that's only the surface level of meaning. The second level of meaning is remez. The R from Pardes is remez, and that means hints and clues, the structure of the language, the way one word over here relates to a word in another part of the Torah. Two rare words that are only found in a couple or three places and how they connect. This is all remez. Remez, the hints of the Torah, as it were. The Dalet of Pardes, the D, is drash, that's homiletics, that's commentary, that's interpretation, which is a very, very, very broad area. How we read and understand what's going on in the higher two levels. And you could fill 5 libraries with drash, people over the last 3,000 years that have been interpreting and trying to understand the Torah and making it relevant to our lives. And the last section of the Samach, the S of Pardes, is Sod, which means secrets. And this has to do with biblical prophecy. This has to do with the hidden secrets of the Torah, and things of that sort. So there are those. Excuse me, what? 6 p.m.
That's right.
Okay. It's wintertime. All right. Moving on. Sorry about that interruption. So these are the 4 levels of depth of studying the Torah. And of course, each one has sub-levels and sub-levels and things of that sort. I want to give you just a couple of suggestions about some of these deeper secrets of the Torah. For example, we know that the giver of the Torah was Moshe. He's often referred to as Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe, our teacher. Well, it's not coincidental that when you do the numerology, the gematria of Moshe Rabbeinu, it comes to the number 613, which in Judaism is a very significant number because that is the number of mitzvot that were given in the 5 books of Moses. There's 613 commandments in there, 248 positive and 365 negative ones. So the fact that his name, as it turns out, his first and, if you will, his last name equals 613 is no coincidence. That's just a chidush, a little deeper meaning than the simple meaning of the words. This one is going to blow your mind if you're not familiar with this. There was an amazing man, Rabbi Michal Dov Weissmandl. He was a Hungarian rabbi. He was born in 1903, died in 1957. He is a Jewish hero. Notwithstanding what I'm about to tell you, he was one of the leaders of Hungarian Jewry during the Second World War. And when the Nazis started the roundups and deportations in 1944 in Hungary, which Hungary had resisted doing it, finally the Nazis marched in and did it for them. He recognized the fact that the Nazis were losing the war. A lot of the soldiers that were being sent to Hungary were either 15 and 16 or in their 60s. And he very, very strongly advocated violent uprisings against the Nazis to prevent them from deporting Jews to the death camps. The Jewish establishment in Hungary disagreed with him, and they felt the best way to save the most number of Jews is to be compliant. They overruled him. And as we know, 75% of Hungarian Jewry died in the death camps because they did not take his advice. He did survive the war. He moved to Israel, but he died a broken man in 1957 at the tender age of 54. But the reason I mention him to you today is because he stumbled on one of the greatest secrets of the Torah that was only revealed within the last 100 years. He discovered the Bible codes, and this is long before there were computers to do it today. He realized that if you look at the letters of the Torah as a matrix, and if you do 50-letter matrices, you start writing letters to count the 50th letter in space, and then you start the next line again, and you go 50 letters, and you go next line again. You develop a matrix of letters, and it creates a word search kind of grid. And what he discovered is that there are all kinds of messages in the Torah text that you discover when you create these matrices. For example, the Rambam, Rabbi Moses Maimonides, lived around the year 1100 in he was born in Spain and lived in Egypt. He was the court physician of Saladin, and he wrote. He was one of the greatest rabbis of his times. He's still authoritative to this day. What Rabbi Weissmandl found was that the Rambam is encoded in the biblical text. The name of his magnum opus, Mishnah Torah, is encoded in it. His acronym Rambam is encoded in it, and the date of his birth is encoded in it. He also found references to other Torah luminaries in the Torah text, including Rabbi Judah Loew, the Maharal, Prague. And if you think about this, that the Torah would have predicted the existence of these great leaders of Judaism. There's no human being that would have been wise enough to live 3,300 years ago that could have forward engineered this kind of code into the book in advance. It's just one of the subtle proofs of the divine authorship of the Torah. I believe there was a mathematics journal where this phenomenon, I think the incidence of finding meaningful words is 7 standard deviations from random. So clearly it is not just a random occurrence. They've tried running the Bible codes in the New Testament, and they find nothing. They try to run, the Bible codes in, Melville and Hawthorne, and they find nothing. It's only in the 5 books of Moses, not even the other books of the Torah, but the 5 books of Moses, which were dictated by God to Moses, where we find these codes. One of the most chilling ones is at the very end of the book of Deuteronomy. There is a section of the Torah where it says God tells Moses that even after his imploring the Jews not to stray from the covenant with God, he says in the future they will. And he says, I will hide my face from them. In Hebrew, it's Hester Panim. And God will hide his face from the Jewish people. And in that section, the Bible codes in that section, you see references to Hitler, to the Nazis, to the year 1942, which is when the final solution was enacted, and Shmad in Hebrew, which means destruction. That was all encoded in the codes, in the Bible codes, written 3,500 years ago. That the Holocaust was predicted by the 5 books of Moses. So this is one of the deep secrets of the Torah that one would not be able to discern by simple reading of the text, or even through commentaries, homiletics, or even hints. So with that, the Torah is worthy of our study for the following reasons. First of all, it is the Makor HaChaim. It is the source of life. God is the source of all of the life force in the universe. And when we study his Torah, we are plugging into the source of life. If you have an expensive vacuum cleaner, it doesn't matter how expensive it is, but if it isn't plugged into the source of energy, it's useless. And when we human beings study Torah, we are plugging into the life source that flows through the universe, because the Torah was given to us by God, and it reflects God's will in this world. So for that reason alone, it's worthy of our study. Second reason is Ahavat Torah. It is addictively fun to study Torah. When you have command of Hebrew and the Aramaic, and you start studying these texts in the original, you find that it becomes addictive. There was a rabbi named the Or HaChaim, Rabbi Chaim Ibn Attar, who lived, I believe he was Algerian or Moroccan. He lived in the 16th century, I believe. And he writes in his commentary on the 5 books of Moses that if the average person knew how much fun and how addictive it is to study Torah, they would never leave the study hall. It is so enriching and so pleasurable and enjoyable to study Torah, that it is certainly worthy of our attention. The third reason is what I call the map of the minefield. Life can be a minefield. And as we know, it's very dangerous to cross a minefield. You could step in the wrong place and blow your leg off. But the Torah, as it were, is a map of the minefield of life. God commanded us to avoid certain behaviors and encourages us to do certain behaviors. And all of those avoidance behaviors are designed to keep our foot from falling in the wrong place. So when we study Torah, we have a map of the minefield of life. And the hope is that people who take these admonitions to heart have a somewhat more a pleasant life than those who blow off the rules, do what they want, and then they wind up with the consequences of their behavior. In a similar note or a similar idea, the Torah is the owner's manual of life. Every complicated machine comes with an owner's manual, even non-complicated machines. And if you buy, for example, an automobile and you pay attention to the owner's manual's recommendations for maintenance, that automobile is going to last you many, many years and give you years, maybe decades of good service. But if you ignore the owner's manual for that machine and you don't change the oil and you don't change the brakes, the car is going to have a premature lifespan. So it is with us. When we have an owner's manual for life called the Torah, when we study that owner's manual, we are assured of a much more pleasant life, a much less traumatic life, and things of that sort. And lastly, to close this little schmooze, the Torah gives us the meaning of life. Some of us struggle with why are we here? What are we doing? And the answers are to be found in the Torah. My apologies to Monty Python, but I just wanted to end with a chuckle that the Torah actually is the source of how to live a noble, dignified, meaningful life. For a time, I was helping a friend of mine who was a Mennonite fellow in Pennsylvania run his monument business. He made headstones. And part of my job was to scan through the obituaries and to send a packet out to the families saying, please consider using us to make your headstone. Just basic marketing. But as you would read through the obituaries, some of them were profoundly sad. And they were sad because here's a person that lived into their 80s, perhaps. And the obituary says, here died so and so. He had 2 kids. And the only thing they can say of his life, was that he was a great Philadelphia Eagles fan. And how tragic that is, that after 80 plus years on this earth, the sum and substance of his accomplishments were just that he was a great sports fan. The Torah helps us live a life of meaning so that when we do die, we can point to accomplishments that we have done to enrich the lives of others and to make the world a little bit of a better place than we found it. So thus endeth the lesson. I hope you enjoyed this little exposition on what is Torah and why it's worthy of our study. I will do another one next week. We will continue exploring Jewish philosophy. Thank you for tuning in and have a great rest of the week.